There we go. Just need to add myself. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of ECH Postgame Live after a 3-2 overtime loss against the Winnipeg Jets. And this one felt pretty predictable, I guess, that it went to overtime. The Kraken and the Jets always play each other really close. Felt kind of like a repeat of the game early in October when the Jets came here and beat the Kraken in overtime then. But man, these teams always just find a way to play close games. I believe the one in Winnipeg, the Kraken lost just at the very, very end of regulation. But happy to have you all in here. It's me starting this off. Dylan is down talking to the Coach Dan and the players after this game. And so, of course, hear what they had to say after this one. And I see we got some super chats in here already. But before we jump into those, just want to thank our wonderful sponsor, Queen Anne Beer Hall, for sponsoring all of these post-game lives. And of course, you have the chance to go to Queen Anne Beer Hall and watch the game 3 days from now with our ECH watch party at Queen Anne Beer Hall, Wednesday, March 19th, 6:30 p.m. for that game where the Kraken take on the Minnesota Wild. Can't wait to see you there. You can win Kraken tickets. We'll do a raffle at second intermission. We got some fun prizes, including a pair of tickets to a future Kraken game. I believe that one will be for the Kraken Stars game here on the 31st. So can't wait to see so many of you at that watch party. Looking forward to it. So we'll start things off with a super chat from Light here. 2-0-1 on a homestand against 3 hot teams, and Yanni got 2 goals over that span. Outside of tanking reasons, this has been great hockey since the deadline. Totally Light. I mean, the tanking is a little bit tough, and I did suggest the Kraken should maybe even pull their goalie in overtime. I don't think they'd ever do it. Of course, that loser point doesn't really do them any good. But you know, the Kraken have played some pretty good hockey as of late. This is as good and as fun of a homestand as I think you really could have asked for at this stage of the season. The Kraken playing toe-to-toe with this Jets team. They always find a way to do that, but also beating Montreal, beating Utah, teams that are kind of on the outside looking in, but fighting for their playoff lives. It's been a fun homestand, and especially with Yanni Newman. I mean, that's a big talking point tonight. With him getting another goal, it looked a heck of a lot like the first of his career, and he scores the second in 3 games. He just adds another dimension to this power play that I'm so excited about. It's amazing what having a true shooting threat on that side does, and just makes other teams respect other elements of the power play as well. But he found a way to sneak down into that position again. Jordan Eberle hits him with a pass from behind the net. I mean, it just looked almost identical. And then that shot from Yanni Newman is just so special and heavy and just beats Hellebuck. Feels weird to talk about Hellebuck in this game, just played for a few minutes. But good for Yanni Newman, and after another goal. And I think Dylan's going to be talking to him. I think that's one of the players that we're going to get after this one. So next super chat here from Kraken fan. Love seeing Turbo being Turbo. Too bad it was for another team. Yeah, and that's something that Dan Bilesma talked about this morning is Turbo coming back, and said that it'd be kind of weird to play against him, to see him in another uniform. And he said, you know, Turbo brought that energy for us, brought everything that he brings, and he's going to bring it here tonight and give it back to us. And he certainly did early on in this one, sending Shane Wright into the boards pretty hard. I wasn't really a fan of that hit. I'm glad Ty Karche kind of stepped up, sent a message there to Turbo, who really had no problem hitting his former teammates in this one. But again, that's Turbo being Turbo. That's who he is. I wouldn't expect him to ever be any different. Super chat here from Kendall. Good game all around. Fun to see Newman score on Hellebuck while he was at net for like 5 minutes. PK looked great. Yeah, I mean, it was fun to see Newman score. Yeah, that Hellebuck thing was weird. I mean, Comrie comes out. It was the concussion spotters that got him. And glad he seemed to pass all the tests that they must have given him, that he was okay, able to return to the game. You never want to see anybody hurt. Just unfortunate collision there with Matty Beniers. And then Hellebuck coming in was pretty good in his time in net, made some big saves, but I mean, nobody was stopping that Yanni Newman shot. And then the PK did look great. I mean, 2 clutch penalty kills in the third period. And that's a position where the game really could have gone off the rails if it had gone a little bit differently, where I think you look at it, it was early in the third period. Vince Dunn takes that hooking penalty. Kind of felt like the Jets were due for a power play at that point. Not much going there for Winnipeg. And then a second power play as well. the Kraken did such a great job getting in the passing lanes, pressuring the puck carrier. I love Chandler Stevenson on the PK in this one, just the hustle and the effort that he was giving. I will give credit when credit is due. I've been tough on Chandler Stevenson in the past, but I just saw him hustle and give effort in a way that I haven't really seen much this year from him. So great game from him, and especially on the PK. Let's see. So as we scroll back up to the top of chat, Tammy says, well, speaking of Chandler Stevenson, until Forsland mentioned it in the broadcast, I had no idea Stevenson was our point leader. Yeah, he has been for a little while. He's certainly been producing offensively. I think 4-game point streak coming into this one. And yeah, I mean, I've talked about, the different elements of his production, a lot of it against bad teams early on in the season, but he has been pretty decent in the second half of the year, and he's certainly producing offensively. And it's a close race too. Let me look and see. I believe I kind of have it up here. If I can pull it up real quick, how close the others are from catching him. Because it is a close point race. I think it's going to be a close, fun point race and goals race. Yeah, Jared McCann 1 point behind Chandler Stevenson for the team point lead. Jaden Schwartz 7 points back. So Shane, I feel like, is the only guy who maybe could take that over, and he'd need to kind of get back to producing like he was earlier. And then now they decide to be OT merchants. Exactly. I was hoping this one would end in regulation one way or the other. I think that's just generally better for the Kraken. But hey, Dylan did complain about how they didn't have enough OTLs on the podcast. And hey, look what they're doing now. So I think we can all blame Dylan. I think that's the real takeaway from all of this. Costanza, fire loser points into the sun. Agreed. I hate that system anyway. Don't like that rule. Lindsay, team tank and team home wins both losing night. Everyone is miserable. Yay. Yeah, we politely refuse the loser point. This is why you pull the goalie in overtime. I really do stand by this. Like, they will take away the loser point from you if you lose in overtime pulling the goalie. That would benefit the Kraken. And I know, there might be some people up in arms from the league, or people wouldn't view that as properly sportsmanlike. Okay, tell the NHL to change its dumb rules. Stop incentivizing losing for teams. There are ways to do that for teams at the bottom of the standings, or change the overtime format with the loser point. One or the other. I think it's just bad incentives, and so the better, more you point them out, I think the better, because that's what changes them. Let's see. Heather here, happy for Yanni to get another goal. Should they have brought him up earlier and benched a veteran to see how he worked? As much as I think Yanni Newman has really helped the power play, and I love what he brings, I don't think that they should have brought him up earlier, just because he was developing so well in Coachella Valley. And remember, he's still 20 years old. And so it's really hard for a 20-year-old to kind of make this jump. I'm amazed that he's doing it as well as he is. And he looks comfortable. He looks confident. And so he certainly belongs here now, it feels like. I don't know that would be the case had you done that in, say December or January. I think he kind of needed those extra games with CV. But it's a worthwhile thought, because I think in certain ways, like on the power play and with the shot, he's certainly an improvement. I think he probably would have been in December or January, but as far as his overall development, that's what's most important. And I think this timeline is probably best for him. Ethan saying Yanni is fun. Definitely agree with that. Bryce asking, do you think Newman stays up on the road trip? I mean, given the way he's playing, 2 goals in 3 games, I would certainly hope that he does. There's a chance, I would say, that maybe it was just the plan all along. He plays the homestand, he goes back. And if that was always the plan and they're sticking to it, again, we don't know what the plan is. We haven't been let in on that. Then I imagine they'll probably stick to it. But the way Dan Bilesma made it sound when he was first called up, he made it sound like it was going to be performance-based, how long he stayed up here. And if that's the case, I think you got to keep him up. You just have to. Kraken Queen, better game than I thought it would be. Wasn't expecting to come away from it with bad feelings about Turbo. I mean, yeah, that is kind of the counterpoint to the whole Turbo being Turbo thing, is that, he does take that run at Shane Wright, at a young player there, and gave a hit that I didn't love. And so I know plenty of Kraken fans, kind of frustrated with him after that play. And we certainly saw it on the Discord there. Some mixed feelings, to say the least, about Brandon Tanev. And, this is what he is. This is who he is. This is what he's going to do. And he's the kind of guy that we haven't thought about it much, because he's always been on the Kraken side since they've existed. But he's just one of those players that I've heard described in a way, you love him when he's on your team, you hate him when he's not. and that was kind of the case tonight. And then let's see. Kylie, woohoo, 5 out of 6 on the homestand. Glad they aren't caving to fans wanting them to tank. All entertaining games. I mean, yeah, a team will never, tank of their own accord. I mean, the only tanking that can really happen is just from a GM who will trade away pieces to make it tougher for a team to win, at the deadline. And, as Ron Francis said when he was on TV, he said, they're trying to win games and I've made it tougher for them to do that with the moves I made. But, I had to do that for the long-term future of the team. And so, but the team on the ice is always going to, I don't want to say always give their full effort because we haven't really been able to say that about the Kraken all season, but they're never going to buy into the tanking. So glad to see some entertaining wins at home. I just think it's really big for the fans to get some of these going later on the season so that, hey, fans hopefully kind of remember this too, looking at next year. Super chat here from JTB Hockey. Love the effort tonight. Are we concerned with Riker and his recent shaky performances? I'm not all that concerned. I understand. Yeah, he's had a couple kind of shaky performances. Certainly that game against Montreal. I think that might have been his worst game of the season. That was really rough. And I think Dan Bilesman agreed to an extent. He was asked this morning if the healthy scratch for Riker was to kind of, do a reset a la Shane Wright and let him focus on what he does best in his game. And he said, yes, it was. There was a reason for that beyond just wanting to get a different defensive look, that he was hoping that Riker would kind of take some of that message and focus on what makes him the best defenseman that he can be. And, not his best game tonight. I didn't think he was terrible, but of course he is on the ice for those first 2 Winnipeg goals. And, the first one, I blame him more for the first one than the second one. The second one's tough because he does shoot into some shin pads, but then Kyle Connor, I just, what an impressive play by Kyle Connor. They were about even when Connor gets the puck and Evans was skating full speed back. I was watching him in his stride. He was going as fast as he can possibly go. And Kyle Connor just left him in the dust. That is just an elite player with elite skating going faster than most players in the NHL can go. And I can't really fault Riker Evans for that. The first one, yeah. Who was it that banged that home? Was it Perfetti for Winnipeg? Just kind of snuck behind Evans. And that's one where I'd like him to kind of have his head on a swivel, make sure that guy can't sneak by him. But, overall, I'm not too worried about him because this season as a whole, he's been all right. But he's a young player. These are the kind of growing pains that you're going to have. And, when it does come time for contract negotiations in the summer, maybe that's not the worst thing either. That, if he still has some games that are maybe not the best, it might mean a lower contract number for the Kraken, which could benefit them in the long term. So it's not the worst thing. Let's see. Glad everyone's on board with the don't tank. Yeah, because the team's not going to tank. I think with some of the tougher competition coming up, like the losses will find them at times. They're not going to, I don't think, go on some massive run to end the season. Just the competition is too good. But we got to enjoy the wins when they come. And Nicole saying we really need to be losing though at this rate. We'll be 10th in draft position. Yeah, that's it. The losses will come. Yeah, if they win out the rest of the year. Or well, actually, that would be pretty exciting and fun. But if they, let's say they, win like 70% of their games the rest of the year, that probably would be bad long term. But I just don't think they're going to do that. Let's see. Elbel, that game was great for special teams, especially the PK. Also thought it was Joey's best game in a while. Who would have thought giving athletes a chance to rest could improve their game? You sound a lot like Dylan, turning to me in the first period after Joey made some big saves and be like, who would have known that resting him would make him play better? And that seems like it's been the case. I mean, goalies need the occasional rest. I think Joey certainly needed it. And yeah, he bounced back in a huge way in this one. And I thought he looked fantastic, made some really big saves and, just brought more of the game that we know from Joey Decord. So happy to see that from him. And I think just resting him a little more the remainder of the season is going to be very important, especially since Philip Grubauer has given you 2 really good games in a row. Shouldn't be afraid to start Gru. I would give him the Chicago game coming up. I think you can certainly afford that. Chicago is no good. That should be a win if you play well at all, and Grubauer can handle it. Let's see. Taylor, while the Kraken aren't good this season, that was a good game. Agreed. And yeah, Brooke, any positive feelings I had towards Tanev are gone after that hit on right. Yeah, definitely seeing both sides of the Tanev thing. And yeah, I mean, he's he's not on the Kraken anymore. We're, I guess you're not obligated to like him. Let's see. Sean, that steal by Yanni makes me want him to stay up. That goal was pretty sweet too. He really made the most of his time. Yeah, the steal and the chance too by Yanni Newman, that was huge. I mean, and it got the crowd on their feet too. Whenever he has the puck in shooting position, it just feels like there's more of a buzz in the building than just anybody else with the puck in a position to shoot. I think Kraken fans, certainly the ones here at Climate Pledge, have caught on to that possibility of Yanni just sniping one at any given moment. And so that's kind of fun to see, especially in person. Let's see. Pablo, my birthday is tomorrow. All I wanted was a Kraken win. Well, happy birthday tomorrow there, Pablo. Sorry the Kraken couldn't get the win for you, but they kept it close, and maybe they can get one the day after your birthday, maybe a late birthday present for you against Chicago. They should be able to get the win for you there. Let's see. Marina, will there be a special place for Emerald City hockey fans to sit at the beer hall? Yes, there will be. We'll have our own reserve table and seating area, so all the ECH people will be able to sit together for the watch party. It'll be the same thing at Moss Bay Hall on April 2nd. Good question there, Marina. Yeah, we'll all be sitting together, and everyone will have the chance to chat with Dylan and I and with each other. And yeah, we'll have a kind of our own section there, so it's going to be really fun for the watch party. Let's see as I scroll down a little bit in chat. Edward, calling it now. Kraken play well down the stretch, build up confidence of the young guys, and as a reward for not tanking, the hockey gods bless us in the draft lottery, and we move up into the top 4. That would be nice to see. I'm feeling the vibe, says Edward. I would like that. I would like a nice lottery win to move up there, and I feel like I do tend to, Kraken aside or whatever, tend to root for teams where it felt like they weren't tanking and they were still giving effort down the stretch when it comes to the draft lottery. Who knows how much the hockey gods come into play there, but I'd like to think that that those teams could do a little bit better. Let's see. And then, yeah, Kylie, much prefer building confidence of the young guys than having them in a tank environment to maybe get 1 or 2 picks higher in a weak draft. Yeah, it is that balance there. I mean, the one thing I'd say is it does seem to be a pretty clear top 4 in this draft. And if it's the difference between pick 4 and pick 5, that is pretty big. And, I think the best way to look at it is just wait till there's like 3 games left or something, and you kind of know where they're going to be. This is too early to be talking, about the intricacies of draft position. But if it's like the last game of the season, and they could move from pick like, the 3rd best lottery odds to 5th or 6th by winning, look, we can root for the loss and it's okay. It's not, a tanking environment. It's like 1 game. Actually, fitting to say this against the Winnipeg Jets is the Kraken a couple of years ago, played their last game of the season, kind of meaningless last game against the Winnipeg Jets, and lost that one. And the Jets had a big come from behind win, and it felt kind of like a heartbreaking game. But that loss got them Shane Wright. And so it ended up being huge in the long-term state of the franchise. So at that point, we can start thinking that way. But until then, I'm all on board. If they're going to play well, if they're going to win games, then I'm going to be happy about it. See. Daniel, did you see Papa Newman after the goal? Totally been there, done that. Look, I know the difference between Yanni Newman's dad and his mom on the celebration reaction. And yeah, those who saw the broadcast, Kendall, Papa Newman knows what his kid's about. Totally. I love the difference there. The mom just going nuts and cheering, the dad just, yeah. Like, I know he can do that. And they were both going nuts for the first career goal, and that's exactly what you want to see. But man, his dad has just like been there, done that. That is great to see. I thought that was really funny. Let's see. Coco said the game seemed very sloppy by both teams. I think there were stretches of it where that was the case. There were like maybe 10, 11-minute stretches kind of in the middle of like the first, second period where it kind of felt like it was a little sloppy from both teams. But I think that was maybe just kind of them trying to get into a rhythm, and also the Kraken playing really good defense through the neutral zone. The Jets were trying to get clean looks through the neutral zone, and the Kraken were doing a really good job just clogging it up and making sure they couldn't get that going. That's a take from Dylan, where I was asking him too, like, why aren't the Jets able to kind of get possession in the offensive zone, get the looks they want to get, and use their speed and skill. And that's kind of what he told me. So love having Dylan next to me for these games. And then Terrible Lotus, I agree with you. I would love it if they change the rules to stop the rush to the bottom. Don't incentivize losing at this time of the season. I won't get on my soapbox here because it's not fair, because I know Dylan would just argue against me here because he disagrees. But I'll save it for another Red Glare as we can rehash that argument. Let's see. Edward, didn't the Four Nations face-off use a different point system that put a greater emphasis on winning? Yeah, it did. And as Kylie's saying, they did 3 points for a win, and then I think it was like 2 points for an overtime win, if I'm correct. And so I do think that is a better point system, because, I mean, first of all, it just means that all games are worth the same amount of points, and that overtime games, you're not incentivizing teams to play for overtime because the game isn't worth any more as a total, whereas in the NHL, overtime games are worth more collectively than regulation games. And I think that's kind of a messed up part of the point system. So I wouldn't mind that, the Four Nations point system as well. And it works great for a short tournament too. See, Terrible Lotus, Chicago will be the real test. We will know if we've improved, if we can play well against the Hawks. I think it'll be hard to play worse. It was one of their worst games of the season early on when they lost to Chicago. And also, I think the Blackhawks have gotten worse as well. They were bad then. I think they've gotten even worse. They are just rough right now. Brooke, will Bedard continue his goon streak against us? I wouldn't count on it, but you never know. Yeah, we'll see. Hat trick of 10-minute misconducts. That'd be funny. I mean, he should probably be frustrated after the season they're having. I imagine he is. We'll see how he decides to take it out. Russ, I feel like the vibes are so bad in Chicago now. The Blackhawks will wreak hell on the Kraken and win in a nasty way. With a team like that, anything can happen, but I'd still, it's more likely than not that they don't come out very good. Let's see. Julia, Edmonton, Dallas is not going to be as nice of a homestand. Yeah, that's the next homestand. Edmonton, Dallas. So any wins they get on that homestand, we don't even think about the tank or the standings, just appreciate those. That'll be very impressive in its own right if the Kraken can take down any of those teams for any of those games. And yeah, exactly, that's the truth. Kylie, watch us win all three. It would be so like this Kraken team. Costanza would love to see Yanni for the rest of the season, considering there is no slide on his contract, but will they keep him away from a contending CV that long? That's the other factor with Newman, is that I think they're going to keep playing him as long as he plays this well and kind of gives them no choice. But I do think they probably, there's an element of them that wants to maybe send him down back to CV just so they get their leading scorer back, and he can kind of go back to playing big minutes there. I do think being in CV is also going to be good for him. I see Dylan getting ready here, so he should be able to join us soon. Let's see. Oh, Rayanne, I'm so sorry about your cat. She watched every Kraken game and was the best little kitty in the world. I'm so sorry to hear about that, Rayanne. I've been there. It's really tough, but I hope you're able to kind of feel better a little bit from that. So it's never easy. Also I wanted to thank you for donating the prize for the for donating the Joey bobblehead for the watch party. That was really nice of you, and it was nice to get to meet you as well the other day. So on Friday. So again, I'm just so sorry to hear about that, Rayanne. Hang in there. It's never easy. Let's see. And appreciate the well wishes there from Kylie and others. So let's see, as I kind of go down closer to the bottom of chat here. Let's see, wait, Julia, something. Is anyone else on this hilarious monorail blue train? What's happening? A very funny announcer. Funny announcer on the blue train. If I was, let's see. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I wonder what's going on the blue train. I'm sure you could tell Dylan all about that when he gets back, as he's about to join us. I could tell he's close. Striatic PWHL point system is superior. I agree. I know. I think it's great. PWHL does a lot of stuff right. Alan thinks they'll send Newman back before they leave to Chicago. Like, it wouldn't shock me, but I kind of hope that they keep him for the road trip. As we've got Dylan here about to join us, I'm just waiting for him to give me the thumbs up that he's ready. And there it is. Dylan, welcome. How you doing? And kind of, what was the mood from the players, from the coaches, kind of in the locker room after a close game, but another tough loss to Winnipeg?
Yeah, no, it's somber, right? Everybody was, little downbeat after this one. I think it's one where they really thought they had this one. I mean, second time this year against this club that you go to overtime and you're not able to get the job done. I think they really, tried hard. They really made sure that they competed in this one. Saw a ton of effort up and down the lineup, and you go out there, you play top team in the league like that. Force overtime, you're in the game kind of at the beginning, get on the board, all that kind of stuff, and you're just not quite able to finish the job. And I think that just it's a feeling that probably lingers.
Yeah, I'm sure. And that's the kind of thing that should wear on any competitive team, right? That, I feel like if you're not feeling bad about that, you probably shouldn't be playing. So who did you talk to? What players did you talk to?
So first up, we talked with Mikey Asmont. Happy to score a goal, but again, just felt like there was more out there that they wanted to accomplish than what they were able to accomplish. And this one was basically the vibe from him. Just it feels like he's kind of playing his game, but just felt like they were trying to do more than just get to OT against the Jets.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure the individual stuff probably not much of a comfort there in a game like this. And was it Yanni Newman, the other one you got?
Yeah, it was Yanni Newman who, basically kind of said the same things that he's been saying after all of these games, which was just shooting the puck, likes to shoot the puck, makes the most out of shooting the puck, and just trying to pick up on the other aspects of the game, forechecking, that sort of thing. Just it's one of those things where it's just going to take reps, and for him to get more experience at this level, get the workout against the physical players at this level, the physicality of this level, and he'll just kind of keep getting better at things from there. But for the most part, right, like he wants to shoot the puck, and he should be, because his shot's incredible, and that's really what we get from him.
Yeah. Did Dan have anything to say about Yanni in his game that might hint towards whether he'll be up for the road trip or not? Because that's definitely been an area of discussion for us.
Yeah, he talked about both Yanni Newman and Mikey Asmont, the two players that we talked to. No, there was no hint as to what we might expect from Yanni Newman. Kind of talked about what he's seen from him these last 3 games, and he obviously mentions scoring the 2 goals and that was good. But otherwise, just kind of gave a fairly generic response as far as, just, oh, he's playing well. Like I was trying to go over it to like pick out a quote about it, but the bottom line is it's just, he had a nice performance tonight. It's just all like generic. Like there is no quotes here. You know what I mean? It's just
doesn't want to tip his hand there.
Spend some good time in the offensive zone, make some plays. Thought his line had a real good shift in the second. Like there isn't much there. So I don't know what the plan is going to be with Yanni Newman. You and I both kind of talked about it earlier in the game. We put our thoughts on Discord as to what we thought the odds were that Yanni Newman would go on the road trip and maybe play in Chicago on Tuesday. And then also whether or not we would want that for the Kraken. And you had it at 50-50, which was kind of my first inclination too. And then I worked myself down to about 33%, maybe about a third.
Did he go?
That he goes. Yeah. I think that, if Ron's already talked about wanting to use that fourth call up on a Ryan Winterton, something like that, maybe we see that for the next homestand, then my guess is there's been a larger plan in place for how they're going to work these young players into the lineup and everything. And so that kind of made me come down a little bit off of the 50%. That, and I do feel like, he's great on the power play, Yanni Newman. Like obviously he could be a focal point of an NHL power play right now. He is very smart. It's not just his shot. It's his smarts. It's him seeing open space and going and seizing that open space. That's what he did to get the goal tonight. That's something that like nobody else on this team really does, and it's something that is really important on a power play. Like he read that play completely and put himself in a spot where he could receive that pass from Jordan Eberle. Like that was a very smart heads up play from Yanni Newman there. I think that we're seeing that stuff on the power play, but 5-on-5, we see like a handful of plays throughout the 5-on-5 ice time that he's getting, but I don't know that we're seeing enough that would make the team maybe want to keep him up, especially if it means the lines have to stay this way and Shane is stuck down on the fourth line and everything. So I think the odds are a little less. That being said, you and I both think that he should stay up. You, because of how great he is on the power play, and he really like turns the power play around kind of single-handedly. And me, because this is the perfect opportunity for Yanni Newman to get reps against other players, how physical NHL defensemen are. It gives him great, hands-on experience trying to go to a net front, trying to stay net front, because he does a good job of getting there. It's just that he generally gets pushed off pretty easily. The rest of the season, the expectations are not high for him. They're not particularly high for the team either. This is a perfect low stakes opportunity to let him go out there and kind of, run up against that wall that is going to be an NHL defenseman who's going to have the same size as him, and let him learn how to use, leverage, how to get low, how to activate his lower body and fight through a lot of the stuff that he's kind of having struggles fighting through right now. And then next year, when he comes up into the NHL level and maybe starts the year off with the team, he won't have to deal with learning those lessons then. He could just kind of hit the ground running.
Exactly. And those are the kind of things that you can get out of the end of a lost season like this one that are so important. That's a point I've been trying to make about Shane Wright and playing against top line competition and, maybe having them not shelter him as much anymore, but I digress. So I want to get to this super chat here from Chuck. Sorry I waited on it so long. Thanks for being patient while Dylan was kind of telling us what everyone was saying. But from Chuck here, we went to the game. I expected Turbo to be physical, hit/trip, but Boarding, our best young player, I booed during his tribute. And it seems like, Chuck, you're not the only one who really turned on Brandon Tanev in this game. That's certainly clear. Dylan, what'd you think about Brandon Tanev, the way he played? Then, of course, that play on Shane Wright.
Well, I'll actually start off with what Dan had to say about it.
Did Dan talk about it?
He was asked if he was surprised that Brandon Tanev would kind of take a run at Shane Wright like that, and he gave a one-word answer, and that answer was no. He then elaborated
one
a little
word,
bit
I can predict what that one word is. Yeah.
Yes. He was asked a follow-up question kind of about just the overall situation there, seeing something like that, a player that he coached a week ago, going out there, taking a run there, Ty Kartye getting involved, all of everything that kind of goes on there. And, he said, look, bottom line is Brandon Tanev's that kind of guy. Like, he's a competitive guy who's going to go out there and play that style of hockey. And so why should he be surprised that something like that would happen? And look, the bottom line is, like, he's not wrong. Like, this is who Brandon Tanev has been. Obviously, we've been on a different side of it, on the Kraken side of things, but like that's kind of what he is as a fourth line kind of grinder guy, somebody who's going to play on the PK. His job is to go out there and lay out the hits and go ahead and, make plays like that, go after guys. I wasn't too surprised to see it. Like, I don't know. I guess maybe people out there were maybe expecting that there would be still some camaraderie or whatever, but the bottom line is he's on a different team now. Kraken are his enemy when he steps out there onto the ice. He is the Kraken's enemy when they step out there onto the ice. There's no reason to treat that situation any differently than you would for somebody that you didn't play with before. That's just not how you can exist at the professional level.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was talking about too. He's one of those players that I think falls in the category of, you love him when he's on your team and you hate him when he's not. And the second half of that is not something we've really had to consider very much, not since the Kraken have existed anyway. And so I think that's something that, everyone saw right away in this one. And that's just kind of how he is. And I think it's one of those interesting parts of having a pest who's on your team that, it's really, is it kind of a first for the Kraken where they've had a player like that they've then had to play against that's done something like that?
The only other player that I can think of, and I can't think of like a specific moment, but like I have that kind of feeling about, would just be Jeremy Lauzon, just because
I was thinking Lauzon too, but yeah,
big physical guy, likes to hit people, likes to play physically. I don't think there was ever any like one specific moment that was as clear cut as this, as taking a run at, arguably the best player, or at least one of the significant future pieces of this team. But Lauzon kind of feels that way. Like he's going to be one of those kinds of guys. Christian saying Donato. I mean, I think Donato from the standpoint of he's going to be a tenacious net front presence that's going to be really annoying, and he's going to score a grinded out style goal in front of your goaltender right there in the crease, and that's going to get under your skin. I agree with that with Donato. But as far as like the physical element, Lauzon probably comes the closest.
Yeah, I would say so. Lauzon probably comes the closest, but the memory I really have of him that sticks with me is actually one of him and Tanev, where he was just behind the net and he's like, "You effing suck, no, you effing suck."
Yeah.
So that's the most animosity I can remember from him.
That epic and imaginative banter.
Yes, that's as you'd expect from those two. I feel like. Oh, good stuff. Let's see as I scroll back up here. Steve kind of challenged me. Come on, RJ. Stevenson hasn't been decent. He's been really good. Probably best player on the team the last 30 days. As I expect, maybe someone named Steve to stand up for Stevie, but I'd still push back on that. I'd say their best player over the last 30 days probably been Brandon Montour, and Stevenson's probably a little bit further down that list for me. But I'll stick with decent personally.
I mean, I think
care to go higher than decent? Do you want to raise me?
I would go higher than that, right? And I've been super critical from day one too, just like you. No, I think he's been top 3. Like I think during different stretches, I'd maybe put other players. Like if you asked me the last week, I'd say Jordan Eberle. Like Jordan Eberle has just been on fire this homestand. Like he's really just back, and he's making plays, and it made another fantastic one tonight. But I do feel like, really the time frame to be looking at is that post trade deadline, post player meeting time period. I feel like that gives us like the last time that we can like really kind of separate that like the team has looked different. They've entered a new stage, a new era of the season, right? And over those last 5 games, they've played extremely consistent, which is unusual for this group. And more importantly, they've played with a lot more effort. And I feel like Chandler Stevenson has been a big part of that. I mean, he was all over the place tonight. I thought tonight was his best back checking performance that he's had all season long. He really made his presence felt in the neutral zone, back checking, coming up from behind against some Winnipeg Jets players, and being able to disrupt what they were trying to do with his stick or stick lifting on them. And it was kind of one of those things where I noticed it at first, and then I really started to watch for it, and I was seeing it consistently. And you and I were talking about what's kind of going on. Like, why are the Jets maybe not pulling away in this game, right? They're kind of they are the better team. They're not kind of the better team. They have been the better team all season. And my answer to you was, well, the Kraken have played really well back checking through the neutral zone. Like Winnipeg just hasn't really been able to get through the neutral zone cleanly or with speed in a way that they want to. And Chandler Stevenson was a part of that. I think all 4 forward lines did a great job of that tonight for the Kraken. I mean, Shane Wright made some fantastic plays back checking through the neutral zone in this one. Maddie, as always, did a great job there. But Chandler Stevenson definitely did a great job in that. And I think it was his best kind of effort performance both ways. We've seen a lot of the offensive performance from him, and we're seeing him, help out on the power play more with this kind of new unit that they have with Yanni Newman there. He's been a good facilitator on the opposite wall, but the back checking from him, it feels like something that hasn't really been there this season. But then seeing it tonight, it's like, okay, so you can be that kind of true 200-foot two-way difference maker. Let's see if we maybe see that a little bit more consistently. And then if he's able to bring that into next year, it feels like, it'll make a world of difference, because that's really what you and I have been critical on this year has really been all the defensive play. Like, yeah, he's been able to, pick up assists and the odd goal off of a rush or something like that. He's got that speed. He can get up the ice, but we have not seen the defensive presence from him. Right. And, maybe still in the defensive zone, it's been an issue. But if the Kraken don't even have to worry about the defensive zone because he's going to back check so hard, I can get on board with that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did a good job explaining. So I had brought this up earlier. I mentioned what you told me about the kind of the back checking through the neutral zone and that conversation that we had. And I think you did a better job than I did kind of explaining your position on that. And I did have good things to say about Chandler Stevenson in this game. Like, as you said, I think he showed a side of himself that we haven't really seen enough this season. And so I hope that kind of thing continues, and we see that he is capable of it. So, if that continues, I'll continue to give credit where it's due. Like I thought the back checking was, and the defensive side was pretty good from him tonight.
Right. And I know, just real quick, sorry. I want to, I'm going to look into this kind of overnight and then bring it up on deep dive tomorrow. But like, I do want to kind of see now where he ranks NHL wide as far as expected goals percentage, because remember, through the first 40 games of the season, he was last in all of the NHL, right?
Like 400 or 500 something,
400 something players. Yes. And he was dead last. So, again, there has been growing pains as far as him coming into the season and everything. Like, I'm not trying to discount the vast majority of the season where that was the case, and also maybe push back on some of the whole, he's been that great all along. There were significant issues when it came to defense and all of that kind of stuff, but I'm curious to see where he maybe ranks now. I'm guessing he's not dead last, but I wonder if he's maybe been able to climb out of, say the bottom 20% of the league, right? Something like that, just to kind of give us like a nice trajectory to kind of finish out the season there with him.
Yeah, I think that would be good to kind of do a deeper dive into those numbers. And you know what? We have a podcast that talks about some things like that, maybe called The Deep Dive, so we can look at it for the podcast. I think that's good. Let's see. Just another comment on the Tanev thing. If we ever need a way to make a clean break from feelings for an old player, this is probably the best way to do that. Firmly say he's not ours anymore, and we can move on. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, definitely.
And then David asking, what's the deal with McCann? I feel like he's completely fallen off the radar. Like, is he adding value? I mean, we talked about Stevenson, who's, kind of had an uptick in production. McCann, the other direction for him this season. Stevenson has surpassed him as the team's leading scorer. I mean, what's your read on what the deal is with Jared McCann? Because the production just isn't there like it used to be. And I think a lot of people are asking why.
He's kind of had issues all season with it, right? And I think Jordan Eberle getting injured kind of started some of this. I think he was able to sustain for a little while after that, but I guess maybe the better milestone marker would be when Kaapo Kakko joined the team, right? Because before that, if you think back to the beginning of the season when he started off the season very strong, leading scorer, all of that kind of stuff, it was him playing with Matty Beniers and Jordan Eberle on the other wing. Jordan Eberle gets hurt. Kaapo Kakko comes in. All of a sudden, that Jaden Schwartz, Kaapo Kakko, Matty Beniers line gets put together. Now Jared McCann's kind of floating in the lineup a little bit, finds a home on Shane Wright's wing for a little while, and then now has obviously been centering for Yanni Newman and Andre Burakovsky the last 3 games. And so I really think that some of it has just been, he hasn't been consistent. He hasn't had a consistent home in the lineup all that frequently this year. We've talked about, his spot on the power play. Teams have been kind of able to defend it. They know it's coming. It's kind of a tough angle for him. Like he basically needs to have a clear line of sight to the net and then also nail the spot in which he's trying to pick. It's not a great look for him on the power play. So it makes sense to me that his power play production could be down this year. But I think just that kind of inconsistency in the lineup, having something that was working for him get disrupted with Eberle's injury and then getting kind of taken off the line with Matty Beniers affected him. And then even Dan Bilesma talked about it this morning when we were at Morning Skate, right? About how he is just a different player when he plays center. He's more of a pass first kind of guy. He's more of a distributor from that role. We know on that line particular, just because he's playing with a really young player in Yanni Newman, he's playing with a player in Andre Burakovsky that's going to be a little bit more offensively minded and maybe try to fly the zone and get up the ice with some speed. He's having to play really deep in the defensive zone. So again, that's not really conducive to him getting up the ice and getting a lot of grade A offensive chances. So I think a lot of that stuff with McCann has just been, he hasn't had a consistent spot in the lineup, and he just hasn't really been able to get into that rhythm. And then right now, especially, it's just not even like, he's just not even in a position to really get going at all.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that assessment. It's the kind of thing where I'd like to, once you're not focused on, whenever Yanni Newman does go back and you're not focused on having the lines, because I think this current configuration is based on trying to get a line specifically designed for Yanni Newman to do well and be supported, right? We're seeing, Shane Wright maybe moved into a role you wouldn't ideally like to see him have, and some other things moved around for that sake. But I think when Newman goes back down, I would like to see, maybe something a little bit different from Jared McCann when you can focus on that a bit more.
Right. And, the Matty line has stayed pretty decent as far as being able to, keep the puck up the ice and all of that kind of stuff, but it hasn't been as great as it was. I do wonder if maybe we see a larger lineup shakeup where maybe we see a line like Jared McCann and Jordan Eberle out there with Matty Beniers again because they had such great chemistry at the beginning of the season, and then just go ahead and swap wingers down to Shane Wright and play Jaden Schwartz and Capo Caco with Shane Wright. Give him some big guys who are going to go out there, go net front, and kind of create some space for him. The way that they've done a good job of making space for Matty Beniers, I could see that being very beneficial to Shane Wright, kind of working back into the lineup from the fourth line. So I would be if I was Dan, I would consider maybe doing something like that now that Jordan Eberle has kind of gotten going again.
I like that idea, and that's the kind of thing I hope they reconsider once Newman goes down, whenever that is. So Zoe with a good question here, and this is something we noticed a little bit during the game. Did Dan talk about Riker and what the plan is for the D pairs moving forward? Seems like at one point Riker and Montour were playing together, but that didn't last throughout the game, and that's something that you pointed out to me at the first intermission. You were going on Money Puck and looking at it. Did Dan have anything to say about that? Was he asked about it?
So he was asked about Riker. He did not comment about the kind of changes in the D pairs throughout the game, but he was asked kind of, straight up about Riker Evans and about, look, does he need a reset? Kind of like what are you thinking here with him? And he declined to comment at first. Now he declined to comment and then proceeded to comment without even needing a follow-up question. And then on top of that, there was a follow-up question in which he commented, but basically, he was asked in like a follow-up question a little bit later on, is this just because it's his first full NHL season and he's just maybe hit a rookie wall and there's kind of like just the, growing pains kind of situation? And Dan really pushed back on that pretty hard. And he said, no, because this is his third full pro season. And he has played a lot of NHL games already. He's played a lot of big AHL games, big AHL minutes. He's like, basically he was saying that's not an excuse kind of thing with Riker Evans and the way he's been playing. Otherwise, like when he kind of declined to comment and then kind of went on to comment, it was kind of like with, talking about Yanni Newman or Mikey Eyssimont earlier, where he said a lot, but there wasn't really anything that you could really pull a lot from. And I think that's because, he didn't want to get kind of maybe too serious with it. And that's why he initially declined and said that he would talk later. He just kind of felt like, it's just been an issue for him. like things have just been an issue. Like I don't know how to describe it, but there is no like good quote that I can read off to you. It's just,
and that makes sense. And that makes sense because that kind of thing does happen for a young player. I mean, this is a normal part of developing as a young player, especially a defenseman. And, it's our job as media to ask about it, right? Whenever there's another game where maybe he's around some goals against. And then it's his job as a coach to not pile on a young player, right? Even if he's maybe thinking, okay, there's some things he could do better here. He already talked about it this morning and told us that the scratch, right? The healthy scratch was, to kind of do a reset. And, there was a message there to Riker. And so he's already told us that. It's not like he hasn't said anything about the situation. And so, as a coach, you figure, okay, I've already talked about it. I might have a message privately for Riker, but I'm going to leave that between, him and I, because, this is maybe the second game in a row that's not as good as you'd like. And, we can kind of work this out between us and try and figure out a way to get you on the right track.
Exactly. And I think that maybe it needs to be a longer reset than one game, because so much of what I'm seeing with Riker Evans is just that he's not trusting his instincts. He's not trusting his reads. And to be an NHL defenseman, I've talked about this before, you need to be able to trust your initial gut reaction read and you just go with it. You do not have time to really think out, okay, in this situation, what's the best play? The game just moves too quickly. You just have to move and react and act just all in a line like that. And the bottom line is the best defensemen just have the best instincts, and that's what makes them great. And I think that that's just something that's kind of going on right now with Riker Evans. I talked about it last game that he played, right? It just felt like he was second guessing himself on things, and you get Slavkovsky kind of walking him, because I thought he actually had the right read initially, which was let me step up to him and use my stick and either poke check the puck away or really force him to the outside. And he would have had to go really wide. But Riker makes that initial move and then decides to turn and try to go with Slavkovsky. The problem is Slav's already got a full head of steam moving forward you taking that time to turn and go with him, he's past you. Like, you can't do that against an NHL player. They're just too fast for you to be able to do that. And I think that that's just one of those things where it's just, he has to be more confident. He has to just trust himself. I think, first, I think that's affecting kind of how he sees everything. We look at both goals that he was out there for in this one. The first one loses the player behind him because I think he's really just trying to focus a little too hard on where the puck is. He's not remembering to keep his head on a swivel and kind of be aware of his more immediate surroundings. He's just really trying to figure out the play in front of him. He's trying to process it all. And the bottom line is you can't do that. You need to just kind of go with your instincts and go with what you know. And I feel like on the second one, where Kyle Connor is able to get around him, I don't put that one as much on Riker Evans, because I think Riker Evans does let his instincts take over at first, in the sense that he sees Kyle Connor start going up the ice. He immediately pulls back into the neutral zone deep. He is getting back there. It's just he then does a bad job of reading that pass before that pass comes. Once the pass comes, it's too late to react. Kyle Connor is too fast. But you could have read that situation and seen, like, okay, that player's got the puck. He can pass it up to Kyle Connor. Oh, where's he looking? He's staring Kyle Connor down. Maybe I should start turning around right now and catch up to Kyle Connor. That's where I feel like Riker maybe misplayed the situation tonight. It wasn't that he let Kyle Connor just go behind him and lost his man like on the first one, because he was backtracking to kind of keep up there and be in the neutral zone. It's when that player who made that pass to Kyle Connor picks up his head and stares down Kyle Connor. That's when you got to turn and start going with it, so that by the time the puck gets to Kyle Connor, you've caught up to him.
It's the anticipation at that speed. And I like I mentioned earlier, like Kyle Connor is just so fast. Once that pass gets together, it gets to him, it's just over, as you said. And then where was it on? And Zoe says, good to know about the Evans thing. Thanks. I was just curious if a Riker Montour pairing means Alexiak is more likely to move this offseason. I think it's something that if Alexiak does move, that would probably be a pair that they would try and give some serious ice time. It would help to look at it now, but I think it's just going to be part of the larger cap puzzle and situation. I think if Riker signs a long-term deal at something in the $5 million range, like they're probably looking at, you just have to move Alexiak. The blue line's too expensive otherwise. I think it just might be a move out of necessity anyway. And so I don't think it's worth necessarily reading the tea leaves here. I think it's just the kind of thing where it's going to be part of the overall build and how much cap space they need.
And he's still, he's played better post-trade deadline, but he's still just not a fit in the system. And you got to imagine that if you're running the same system next year, you'd want to maybe put somebody else in there who's just more comfortable in it.
Yeah, and as Elbel saying, actually, that's a good pull, Elbel, because I remember that from earlier this season. Dan said a while ago that with their speed, a Montour and Evans pairing can keep up with any players. Maybe Dan gave another go for this game to try and match the Jets' speed, which, they certainly have a lot of.
Yeah.
That is a good point there, and way to remember that, Elbel. I should have thought of that. And then Kylie, I'm with you on not overreacting on McCann and the lack of production. I think the trade deadline and the rumors kind of say a lot, where lots of teams were reportedly calling about him, and that wouldn't be the case if teams didn't feel like that was a good buy low opportunity, like he was going to bounce back from that.
Right. No, definitely. And look, I think that there's something to be said. We know, and we've talked about this before, right? After losses and everything, he's somebody who really takes it hard, right? Like, to the point where I've wondered if he really kind of starts internalizing some of that, whether it's the team struggles or his own personal struggles. And I obviously don't know that to be the case, but just given on how hard he seems to take these losses and everything, and the different situations we've seen him in last season and this year, I think that that's kind of a fair thing to maybe wonder about him. And so I do, if you are somebody who kind of does that and the season's gone this way, back-to-back seasons, you've started to struggle, I could see it being a situation where he's just kind of gotten into his own head a little bit too. And when you're a professional athlete and that happens, it's really tough to work yourself out of it.
Yeah, it really is. And I know, no one is harder on himself or any of that after a loss than Jared McCann. He hates losing more than anyone else on this team, I'm convinced. And so that can be tough. And certainly if I'm a winning team, a team that's, consistently a playoff team, that's the kind of guy I'm looking for sure, because we're unlikely to spiral where it gets this bad. And I want a guy that competitive on my team. So it makes sense why teams are calling about him. So as we kind of, open up to chat here, last call as we, approach the 55-minute mark here, Dylan, anything else from the post-game stuff you wanted to mention or talk about, or looking forward to the next game against Chicago? We did talk about that a little bit before you arrived, whether Connor Bedard would take some more penalties, whether, what would go on with that one, what you're expecting out of that game.
Yeah, going into Chicago always scares me. Like, it just feels like this team has had difficulties going in there outside of year 2, when, Martin Jones kind of had his great performance there, and they scored 7 goals in the first period or whatever in that one game.
Yeah.
But
that was a watch party game, actually.
That was a watch party game, and we've got another one of those coming up the night after this upcoming Wednesday.
That's right. Remember, yeah, there we go. Wednesday the 19th.
Casually throw that in there. But, so like in that sense, I'm kind of worried about it a little bit. But the bottom line is, if they're able to take the energy that they've had, that kind of consistent effort level that we've seen for the 5 games now, by the way, everybody, 5
incredible.
Of them. Yeah. If they're able to just kind of play this way down the stretch, then I think, look, Chicago is not a good team. You are definitely a better team than them. I think that we should see, a decent result. Maybe not as strong as the Philadelphia game, but in my mind, like, that's kind of how the game should go.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, that Chicago is just so rough right now. They just look so bad.
Yeah. No, they have.
And Dylan, would you start Grubauer for that one? Because I would.
I would, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that Joey had a fantastic performance tonight, off of maybe having a little bit extra time to rest up a little and recharge. Don't throw him out there again, 2 days from now with a day of travel in between. Let Grubauer take that Chicago game. Let Joey get an extra day, and throw him out there against Minnesota. That's absolutely what I would do based on how they've played these last 2 games.
Yeah, exactly. And that sentiment was certainly expressed in chat early on here for getting Joey some rest. And then Stratic does have a question about Joey. Will Joey ever get a shutout this season? If you had to say yes or no, what do you think, Dylan?
I'm going to say no.
I would agree with
Joey.
You.
Not because
not because of him. No. I mean, there have been games where he's played well enough to earn it in most efforts. I just think it's a tough schedule coming up, and Grubauer is probably going to get the easier games. And all it takes is 1 goal and the shutout's gone.
Yeah, and even today, right? Like, the team played really strong, but how many opportunities were there where the puck was moved, away from where Joey was set up, right? And Winnipeg had opportunities to go after an empty net, right? Like, it happens so much, this team. Like, they have improved defensively. The forwards are coming back and helping out the defensive zone more. The defensemen have picked up their game, but it's still a rough going defensively. And I just think that's it's just a lot to overcome. Joey's already overcoming a lot of it. I don't know that he can overcome it enough to eventually get the shutout there.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. And Kylie, speaking of, did anyone see the NHL graphic that showed Grubauer was 7th in fewest games to 20 shutouts, only 262 games? That's nice. Impressive.
That is impressive.
Yeah, looking at his season totals for actually his final season in in Colorado, sorry, he had 7 shutouts that season as he was a Vezina finalist for that one. But yeah, that's a lot of shutouts in only 39 starts, 7 shutouts.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive. He was fantastic there in his time with Colorado.
I hate my skeptical GM brain that's like, well, that's not sustainable. But
I wanted to talk about these 2 things real quick in chat from a little bit earlier. First off, Jason, Money Puck showing Chandler Stevenson as the 5th worst player in the NHL with 1,000 minutes. So better. It is better, right? Like he is getting better, and I bet we can look at some other numbers and it would show him kind of even higher than that. And then from Sean, when there were rumors about McCann, I honestly wondered if it was McCann himself that wanted to be moved. He's been really pushed down this season quite a bit. So just a thought. I understand where you're coming from, Sean. And I think for other players, I think that would be, kind of maybe the right track to think along. I don't think that's the case with the Jared McCann. Like, I think it's the stuff that we talked about him taking it a little hard, just both the team and personal stuff. And then also just the fact that, he has been a little all over the lineup. And, look, bottom line is he's been a fantastic player in Seattle, but it took him a while to become that player. Like, it's not abnormal for players to have a down season. That, and like, what's his shooting percentage? Like, is his shooting percentage lower than what it's been in Seattle?
I can pull it up real quick.
he might just be having one of those years that a lot of guys have, right? Like good players just sometimes have low point production seasons just because they're unlucky or something happens or they don't play with their normal line mates. Like those things do occur.
Yeah, he's shooting 10%, which for most players would be very respectable. But compared
That's
to
low
13%,
for him.
13% last season, 19% the season before. He's a career 12.1% shooter, and that includes some early parts of his career before he really figured it out.
Yeah.
But with Seattle, he's 14.3% overall, so 10% is down a good ways from that.
Right. So, I mean, you could do the math then on like his shots and figure out like how many goals that would be if he was at average. And I'm sure it would be enough for him to kind of more be on a more regular pace for him and what we've seen from him in Seattle. So there's lots of things that go into when good players struggle. And I just think that unfortunately for him, it's been a little bit of a perfect storm of all of them.
Yeah, I think it kind of has been. I was trying to do quick math here.
Yeah, I didn't mean you specifically.
I know. I'm saying he'd be at 23 goals if he was shooting at his Kraken shooting percentage, and he has 16 right now. So, another 7 goals would probably go a long way.
Yeah, that's a lot actually. So, certainly for anybody on this group, that's a lot.
Yeah, and then Sean being clear, love Jared, love that he truly cares. We need him to be good. Agreed. I think we're all on the same page there.
I know where you're coming from, Sean. I just wanted to say that, like I said, I think for some players that would be very viable thought to have. I just knowing Jared the way that we do and seeing him, I just don't think that that's something he would be thinking.
Agree 100% there. So I think that as we cross the hour mark, that should just about do it for this edition of ECH Postgame Line. But before we go, I want to thank Queen Anne Beer Hall one more time and tell everybody 3 days we've got our first watch party of the season at Queen Anne Beer Hall. Kraken against the Minnesota Wild. They've also got some specials, Dylan, that I don't have the graphics for yet, and I will get up on there a little bit later. But I want to pull this up, though, to let you know, Dylan, though, both watch parties are on Wednesday, and it is Wing Wednesdays. 99-cent wings every single Wednesday, and that is watch party or not at Queen Anne Beer Hall. So you can check that out, everybody. But come to the watch party, get some wings. I'm sure Dylan will get some wings. You get some wings?
I've never had their wings, but I've always wanted to. I've never just really been in a spot. So yes, if I disappear, everybody, and I don't talk to you for a little while at the watch party, it's because I'm finally getting myself some beer hall wings.
Yep. Come to the watch party. Watch Dylan chow down on some wings. Yes. Find out what he thinks of them. And we'll hopefully, we'll see you all in a couple days for that Chicago game. And then hopefully we'll see a lot of you in 3 days for that game against the Minnesota Wild and the watch party at Queen Anne Beer Hall.